Hi all, welcome to the next in the series, Understanding and Using Excel. This time we'll be looking at one of the most powerful features in all of Excel, creating and analysing data using pivot tables. This is the first in the series and there'll be many more to follow. Remember to click on the subscribe button during the demonstration to be automatically notified of when the next demonstration is available. Let's look at the demonstration. Here I see a table of data. There are 4 salespeople, Buchanan, Suyama and DeVolio. They make sales in 2 years that we want to analyse, 2011 and 2012. They sell 4 types of products: beverages, dairy, meat and produce. They sell in 4 regions: North, East, West and South. They sell a certain number of units per sale with a sales value that you'll see in the sales column. Now, if you were asked to extract from the data, for example, the sales for Suyama for 2011 for dairy sales in the southern region, you may well have a big job on your hands. It will be very time consuming and most certainly very prone to errors. In this set of data, for example, there's only 120 odd records, but the job would still be quite major. And this is where pivot tables really come into their own, because pivot tables allow the analysis of data. So how do we create this pivot table? Well, first of all, I need to check the data for consistency before creating the pivot table. Firstly, there must be headings, as I see salesperson, year, type, etc. These will become the field names in the pivot table. There must be a blank row above the headings, unless the headings are in row 1. Desirably, there should be no blank rows or columns in the data, but you can have blank cells. The data must be consistent, that is, each column must contain the same type of data. In other words, if I had a column with dates in it, then I can't have the word cat. So how do I create the pivot table? Well, the first step is to make certain that you click in a cell, any cell in the data itself. Then we go to the Insert tab, and in the Tables group I see Pivot Table. When I click on Pivot Table, a dialog box opens up, the Create Pivot Table dialog box, which is a little bit like a wizard. It says choose the data I want to analyse and then select a table or range. Excel will have surrounded its guests with the scrolling marquee, some people call them marching ants, and that marquee stops at the first empty column and it stops at the first empty row. So that's why it's best not to have empty rows and columns, otherwise you have to manually drag through yourself. It's a good idea to put the pivot table report on a new worksheet, as I see here, and once you're set to go, you simply click OK. What that does, that opens up a new sheet, and over here on the left we see the raw pivot table, and over here on the right I see the pivot table field list with the field headings now showing here. It's quite simple. When I look down here at the categories, there are 4, and it says drag fields to the areas below. There's a report filter, we'll see how that works in a later series, column labels, row labels and values. The values area is reserved for fields that have numbers in them. So what I'm going to do is to drag the salesperson down, because I want the salespeople fields to be shown in the rows, and as soon as I drop down into there the pivot table begins to become created, and there I see the 3 salespeople. Now I decide I might like to see the type of sale that they are making, and I want to see those in the columns. So there are my column labels: beverages, dairy, meat and produce. And when I drop the sales down into the values area, which is reserved for fields that have numbers in them, I see that Excel creates the completed pivot table and by default adds the numbers that are involved. So I can see the grand total for beverages for those 2 years was 214,000, dairy was that, etc., etc., and the grand total was just over 500,000. Don't worry at this stage about the formatting with the decimal points, etc. We'll look at that a little later. Now, I might also like to see the region that these people made their sales in. So I'm going to drag the region down and drop it under the salesperson. And now I see that the pivot table not only shows me the salesperson and the type of produce, meat, dairy, etc. that they sold, but I also see the region in which they sold. Now, this is in the form of a table because I see the drop arrows here, which enable me to filter. So if I just wanted to see Buchanan sales, I could click on the drop arrow, unselect all, put a tick in Buchanan, and click OK, and there I only see Buchanan. To see all of the salespeople again, I go back to this filter button, which is now changed to show that there is a filter involved, and I'll click that, and I can either say select all or clear filter from salesperson, either way, and it puts me back where I was. So that's the table aspect. Where does the word pivot come in? Well, it works like this. This center point here is around which I can pivot the fields that I see. So if I want to see this pivot table in a different way, what I can do is simply drag and drop fields around. So there I see a different view. Well, that doesn't look too good to me, so what I'll do, I'll drag the region this time up and drop it in the columns. So now I see the regions across as the column labels and the produce and the salespeople down in the rows. Another advantage of pivot tables, and remember the advantage of a pivot table is that I can analyze data. So what I want to do this time is to count the number of sales, not only just see the dollar figures involved. So what I'm going to do is to drop another sales field down under that first one, and now I see sum of sales 2. What I'm going to do is to right click on any cell in the pivot table for sum of sales 2, and right click only ever does one thing, it brings up a menu for me to choose from. Everything else, as you may be aware, is left mouse button. So what I want to do is to summarize that sum of sales 2 data, not by the totals, but I want to count the sales. So when I click count, there it has counted the sales for me. So as you can see, I can analyze the data quite easily using a pivot table. If I've finished with the count of sales 2, all I need to do is to drag it and drop it off of the pivot table, and I'm back where I started. I decide for whatever reason I would like to see just the salesperson and the type. I don't want the region, so again I can either drop the region off back where it came from or untick it here in the field list. So when I do that, there I see just the data that I want to see. If I wanted to see the years, I'll drag the years down and see what year they made the sales in, and there we are, 2011, 2012 with the grand totals. So that's the basis of creating pivot tables, folks. It's very, very simple. And just one thing before we finish this particular first demonstration in the series, if I click outside of the pivot table, the field list disappears. And many is the person who has walked down the street at lunchtime fretting because they feel that they have completely deleted the pivot table field list. Or when they come back from lunch, all they really have to do is to click back here into the pivot table, and up pops the pivot table field list. So don't forget to subscribe, and there will be many more in this particular pivot table series. Thank you so much for watching.